Thank you for joining me on another episode of She Leads Now podcast, where we help career and entrepreneurial women gain the tools to develop a success mindset, create winning strategies, build collaborative relationships, and take bold action towards creating impact and fulfillment in their lives and careers. I'm your host, Sabine Gideon, and I'm on a mission to awaken and activate women and emerging leaders so they can tap into their innate leadership ability, elevate their influence, and create the impact they were destined to make. If you're ready to uplevel your confidence, courage, and influence, you've come to the right place. Join me weekly for insights, strategies, and resources to help you grow, develop, and embody the leader you are meant to be, so that you can make the impact you know you are called to make and establish the legacy you've always dreamed. The world eagerly awaits the emergence of your brilliance, impact, and influence. So with that, let's dive into this week's episode. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of She Leads Now. I am your host, Sabine Gideon. Thank you so much for joining in or tuning in this week on the podcast. Thank you for those of you who are my true, consistent listeners. I appreciate you. Thank you for downloading the show and also for reaching out to me with feedback on the content. I sincerely appreciate that. And for those of you who are completely new to the show, welcome. So excited to have you here. My prayer and my hope is that you're able to gain some nuggets that are relevant and that are helpful in supporting you as you navigate today's topic, which is really around hiring and managing a hybrid workforce. In the time that we are in right now, organizations, big and small, are challenged with trying to identify what is the right mix and how to maintain culture within their organizations. Not only are they having challenges with just managing those who are current employees, but there have been really significant challenges for a lot of organizations in terms of retaining talent. And a lot of the attrition and a lot of the retention issues that we're seeing are from individuals who are deciding that, they don't want to go back into the office and they are looking for other opportunities, things that have created this situation where employees are just like, I can't go into the office. I can still do the work. I can still be effective. I can still help drive forward the mission. But if it requires me to be in an office Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, then that's going to be a challenge for me. And let's not forget the commuters, the individuals who are commuting 1, 2, 3 hours one way to get to the office. They don't want to do that anymore. And I don't blame them, not one bit. With all of this in the mix, it's important to recognize that as leaders and CEOs, the onus is on us to figure out the work environment that will not only support our employees and set them up for success, but also continue to foster a cohesive and supportive team. And so I say the onus is on us because at the end of the day, the decision on whether or not to go hybrid or to go fully remote or to make people go back into the office, that starts and stops at the leadership level. If you are trying to figure out the best mix, you have these 3 options, right? The question is, what do your employees want? And I get it. It's not always feasible to adhere to every request from your employees. But if it means you losing a quarter or a third or whatever percentage of your workforce because you're moving in a direction that the majority simply can't or don't want to, then as the leader, you really have to take that into consideration and make the decision that is best for your business and, of course, for your employees. Recently, as of the time of this recording in the last couple of weeks, Elon Musk, right, has made this public declaration that all of his employees need to be back in the office, working their 40-hour days. Tesla is supposed to be like this innovative and cool and whatever type of organization. Someone like Elon Musk, who is supposed to be this contemporary and super innovative and up with the times, here he is stating that everyone needs to be back in the office or they're going to lose their jobs. Now, with his declaration has come a lot of backlash, obviously, from the public and certainly from the employees as well, who now they're faced with a decision of suck it up and figure out how to go back into the office or find another opportunity. And so that's the thing that I really want to drive home here is that at the end of the day, our businesses are the entities that we are in charge of running, that we are in charge of stewarding, and that we're in charge of really bringing to life to support others. But at the end of the day, without two things, right? Without your team and of course without your customers, you have no business. And so this is like the defining moment for leaders across the globe and certainly here in America, because the decisions that you make today, and especially in this time where everyone's emotions are super high, can impact your ability to attract talent 2, 3 years from now. And not only that, it can impact your ability to retain the employees that you do have currently. And so I know that's a lot of pressure and that many of you are, sitting in that space. The truth of the matter is every organization right now cannot just be a remote organization. So we know that. When it comes to hybrid, though, the real challenge and the difficulty that organizational leaders are having is not about who works from home versus who comes into the office, but it's about how do we maintain a culture that still produces the same level of results? How do we create a space in which people still feel like they belong and then not just a number? How do we allow our employees to shine and get recognized for their work when it's not so obvious? And how do we create spaces for them to collaborate with each other? I've heard many times over that sometimes the ideas that come out of someone just stopping by your office or hanging out at the water cooler or going out to lunch, a lot of those things have been taken away. And so now leaders have the obligation to not just figure out what is the structure, right? The physical structure of our organization, but how do we keep all these components? How do we keep our people in a space where they feel supported, they feel recognized, they feel seen, they feel like they still have the same opportunities to advance in their careers as they did when they were physically together? For those who may have not clearly defined their culture, or maybe their culture wasn't in a good place to begin with, they are feeling the repercussions of trying to navigate these pieces. So, as we think about managing a hybrid workforce, what does that look like for the manager? Once you've made the decision, this is the space that you're going to be in, how do you make sure that you have a pulse on what's working, what's not working, what your employees need? Here are a few key ways to creating a strong company culture and managing a hybrid workforce effectively so that you can actually continue to support the business growth goals that you have. First one up, maintain a strong culture. And part of you being able to maintain that strong culture is having a strong vision and mission. If we don't know where we're going and we can't communicate where we're going to others, that is going to create disengagement. So part of having a strong culture is, what is our North Star? Where are we going? Where are we headed? And so part of your role as the leader of the organization is really to reinforce that North Star, getting clear, if you haven't already, what is the vision, the mission, and the values of the organization? Due to the pandemic, things have had to shift and things have had to change. What were those things and how have they impacted the vision, the mission, and the values? This is something that you need to go back to and reassess. And then not only just reassessing it, but making sure that it is being reinforced on a regular basis. So when it comes to bringing on new employees, are you sharing during the onboarding process? And I'm not talking about orientation, because orientation can be one day, it can be an hour, it can be a few hours. I'm talking about onboarding. So that first 90 days, how are you demonstrating? How are you communicating? How are you exemplifying the vision, the mission, and the values of the organization to these employees who are coming on who you may have never met in real life? And then are they also being reinforced on a regular basis? So I talk all the time, your vision and your mission and your values should not just be for your marketing material. The way that it's going to inspire and the way that it's going to allow you to reinforce it in the organization is to continuously keep it at the forefront of the minds of your employees. Are you reiterating them during team meetings or all hands? Are you challenging employees to assess their behavior against the vision, the mission, and the values? Are you bringing in vendors or suppliers that are aligned with your vision and your mission and your values? Are you not even thinking about how that might impact and how that might have a negative correlation between what it is that you're saying that the company stands for versus some of the practices and some of the behaviors that are taking place? And so when it comes to the strong culture, rely on that vision, the mission, and the values, and reiterate it, reinforce it, and integrate it into every aspect of your employees' life cycle, as well as decisions that you make and anyone that you bring into the organization, be it vendors, suppliers, you name it. And so I'll give you a quick example here. When I worked in corporate America, at one point, I worked at an aerospace company. Of course, there was a lot to learn about aerospace because I had never been in that industry. But I can tell you that yes, I learned what my business unit, the business unit that I supported, I learned what they did because I needed to understand that to understand how I could best support the employees. But when it came to the organization as a whole, they didn't really talk about this is why we exist. I knew how they made money. I knew, who the clients were, but the deeper meaning around, okay, this is the impact that we have, whether it be on our clients, our customers, our society, none of that was communicated. And so essentially, I didn't really have a deep connection or attachment to the organization. I just knew what I needed to know for my job. Flip side of that is when I worked at a credit union. When I worked at the credit union, I worked in a recruiting capacity. So that meant that I was the face of the credit union for anyone who was going to come into the organization. And the mission and the vision, I repeated it every single time that I talked to someone. And part of the reason why I did that was because one, I first believed in the mission of the organization. And so it made it easy for me to repeat it to hundreds and hundreds of candidates. But at the same time, if you think about what I said, they were hearing it from the very first conversation. So they might have read it on the job posting site, but then they get on the phone with me and they're hearing me reiterate it. Then we're going into the interview and people are demonstrating it. Then they get hired and it's incorporated in every aspect of the onboarding process. And so it becomes not only just something that they hear, but something that they start to live because it was shown and it was demonstrated. And so for me, when it comes to the credit union, I was so invested in that organization because I wholeheartedly understood what the vision and the mission were and the values. They were aligned with my own personal values and what I thought was important. And so it stopped being about a job and just getting stuff done and just learning the products and the services and supporting who I needed to. But it was, I am invested and I want to make sure that I'm living this out and that I'm supporting in the highest capacity that I can. So that is the difference. And some of you, as you're listening, you've probably had those experiences where you worked at a job and it was just that for you. It was a job. You may have gained great skills and made really big impact, but the organization itself, there was never really truly complete alignment with who you are and what the organization stood for. And then on the flip side, you may have had experiences where you're like, I totally get this company. I totally represent it. I'm proud to be here and I'm going to give my 110%. So if you've had those experiences, I've had those experiences, guess what? Your employees are going to have those experiences. Your contractors are going to have those experiences. Consultants, anyone that you bring into your organization, this is what you want to create for them. And so that's what it means to really build a strong culture. It starts at the onset of your relationship. Second one up is that 9 to 5 no longer exists. Instead, the invitation here is to define the schedules and employees by the work they produce and not the amount of hours that they work. History tells us that this whole 9 to 5 model was originally created for individuals in manufacturing who were doing the same thing over and over and over and over again. And so they could do the same things. That didn't even require a lot of mental capacity or mental engagement. Regardless of whether we're working from home or we were working in the office, think about it. No one was working straight from 9 to 5 anyways. You think about lunch, you think about breaks, you think about those impromptu, hey, you got a minute? You think about stopping and seeing someone in the hallway and having a conversation with them. As humans, we can't operate for that long. And so, really thinking through for your organization and for your team, what are the results that I want? I remember when I first started corporate America, I had some, I'll call them old school leaders where, FaceTime, they were all about FaceTime. That whole mindset of first one in, last one out. That's the philosophy that they had grown up on. And so that's the culture that they created in our departments. But in reality, you want to make sure that there are results because I could sit at a desk for 8 hours and get zero done. Trust and believe. But if there are clear metrics and KPIs around this is my expectation, this is the timeline in which I want to get this done, that creates a space for that person to be able to do it whenever they're most productive. I have a colleague who talks about productivity, and this has been researched that our first few hours of the day is when we're the most productive. And then we need to take a break. We need to step away, and then maybe we're productive again. And another point on this is when someone feels like they have the autonomy to do work when and how they want it, again, that creates a lot more engagement. You want to make sure that your role as the manager is not micromanaging their time, but managing their results. And if you find that you've given this flexibility and people aren't delivering and they're not as productive as they need to be, then you need to have a conversation and level set expectations, but also come from a place of curiosity to understand what's getting in the way. What is it not clear what the expectations are? Do you not have the resources that you need? So this hybrid work environment really requires managers to show up in a much different way than before, as you can imagine. And certainly it requires them to have this skill to be able to co-problem solve, if you will, and coach their teams and their employees to make sure that things get done. And then third, you want to maintain consistent check-ins. As I mentioned before, depending on your work environment or how many employees you have, people have been in isolation. They're dealing with the trauma of the pandemic, and things are happening outside the work hours. As the leader of a hybrid workforce, you have to now establish what makes sense for check-ins, right? What is the frequency or the cadence that makes sense for you to check in on them? Let me just say this here, not just check in on the work that's getting done, but check in on the human being that's doing the work as well. You don't have to get into their personal business, but asking the question around how are you feeling? And that is a powerful question right there versus how are you doing? I was watching an interview recently and the host talked about the differences between asking the question, how are you doing versus how are you feeling? And the difference between how are you doing is people will respond with, oh, I'm fine, I'm okay. It's these pre-programmed responses that we already have. But when you ask the question, how are you feeling? You create that space for that person to be able to dig a little deeper and maybe share some insight that you may have not gotten if you just asked, how are you doing? These check-ins are meant to not only make sure that work is moving forward the way that it should, but that your employee has the resources that they need and that emotionally or mentally they're in a place that they need to be in order to be the most productive. And so to recap here, three things to really consider and really look to adjust if need be to maintain a strong company culture while in a hybrid environment is to make sure that your vision, your mission, your values, that not only are they clear, that they are communicated and that they are lived in every way possible, that you create space, that you create metrics, that you create expectations for your employees to get the work done, but that you allow them the space to get it done in whatever time frame makes more sense for them. And then that you maintain consistent check-ins, both about the work as well as the human being. And just to wrap up here, I do believe that a hybrid workforce actually offers your employees a much better opportunity for growth and results-oriented work. Not to mention the fact that everyone gets to have a much stronger work-life balance, which of course we know ultimately leads to a happier and healthy employees with the focus on wellness these days, just because of burnout and everything else. You definitely want to make sure that you're positioning your employees to work at their highest level in whatever capacity that makes sense. Now, I will say, as the leader, as the CEO, this will require you to show up a lot differently than you have in the past. It's definitely going to require you to pick up some skills. If you haven't really developed your coaching skills, you might be challenged as you navigate this. But the good news is that these skills are learnable and you can strengthen them. If you have a hybrid workforce, I'd love to hear how that's working for you and in your organization, especially if you're like in a growth trajectory where you're looking to bring on new employees who have never been in the office. I'd love to hear what you've implemented, whether it's in your recruiting strategy or even your onboarding strategy to really help integrate your new hires. And then of course, for those who are there, I'd love to hear what you're doing to maintain the culture and to maintain morale. So please feel free to DM me on LinkedIn or IG. Let me know. You can also email me at Sabine@SabineGideon.com. Again, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you're a longtime listener, I sincerely appreciate you. If this is your first show or maybe your first couple shows, thank you as well. I sincerely appreciate you. So with that, I will leave you. Have a fabulous rest of the week, and I will talk to you next week. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of She Leads Now. Be sure to join us next week for another transformative discussion to help you grow, develop, and embody the courageous leader you've always been. Be sure to subscribe to the show to get alerts when new episodes drop, and join us for our next Leaders Lounge meetup on Zoom. Details and dates for future sessions are included in the show notes below, so take a look there or head over to SabineGideon.com/lounge to register and hold your spot for the next session. Again, that's SabineGideon.com/lounge to grab your spot. Excited to connect with you all inside the lounge. Talk to you soon.